The Iraqi regime has plotted to develop anthrax and nerve gas and nuclear weapons for over a decade. According to the British government, the Iraqi regime could launch a biological or chemical attack in as little as 45 minutes. Our intelligence sources tell us that he has attempted to purchase high-strength aluminum tubes suitable for nuclear weapons production. We've also discovered through intelligence that Iraq has a growing fleet of manned and unmanned aerial vehicles. Saddam Hussein has held numerous meetings with Iraqi nuclear scientists, a group he calls his nuclear mujahideen, his nuclear holy warriors. And we have sources that tell us that Saddam Hussein recently authorized Iraqi field commanders to use chemical weapons, the very weapons the dictator tells the world he does not have.
Saddam Hussein is determined to get his hands on a nuclear bomb. He is so determined that he has made repeated covert attempts to acquire high-specification aluminum tubes from 11 different countries.
The threat from Saddam Hussein and weapons of mass destruction, chemical, biological, potentially nuclear weapons capability, that threat is real. We only need to look at the report from the International Atomic Energy Agency.
The United States knows that Iraq has weapons of mass destruction. The UK knows that they have weapons of mass destruction. Any country on the face of the earth with an active intelligence program knows that Iraq has weapons of mass destruction. There isn't any debate about it. We know they have weapons of mass destruction. We know they have active programs.
If your analysis is not correct, then we're not treated as liberators but as conquerors, and the Iraqis begin to resist. Do you think the American people are prepared for a long, costly, and bloody battle? I don't think it's likely to unfold that way, Tim, because I really do believe we will be greeted as liberators.
Saddam Hussein and his regime will stop at nothing until something stops him.
The dictator of Iraq is not disarming. To the contrary, he is deceiving. States like these and their terrorist allies constitute an axis of evil, arming to threaten the peace of the world by seeking weapons of mass destruction.
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 Weapons of mass murder.
This decision for an increased threat condition designation is based on specific intelligence received and analyzed by the full intelligence community.
We cannot simply go back to the Security Council for this discussion to be superseded by that discussion, to be superseded by another discussion.
American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger. On my orders, coalition forces have begun striking selected targets of military importance to undermine Saddam Hussein's ability to wage war.
Adolf Hitler selling the Gestapo, the creation of the Gestapo. An evil exists that threatens every man, woman, and child of this great nation. We must take steps to ensure our domestic security and protect our homeland. That's exactly what they said after 9/11 to justify homeland security and the police state. The same families and networks were behind Soviet communism, were behind the United States, were behind Britain and the so-called allies, and they were behind Nazi fascism. They put Hitler in power. They funded Hitler. How did Germany go from the Weimar Republic, where they were taking their wages home in wheelbarrows, such was the inflation, to a war machine that took on Europe? Because it was externally funded by people like the Rockefellers. The Rockefellers funded Adolf Hitler's race purity expert, Ernst Rudin, on a whole floor of a German university to come up with his race purity crap. And it was funded by the Rockefellers in America. Because once you realize that this force is working through all sides, like we've just seen with that image, it suddenly is no longer a contradiction that a so-called American family, they have no allegiance to America, they have allegiance to their agenda, an American family would fund and create the war machine that then took on and killed so many Americans as well as so many other people. It's not a contradiction anymore when you know how the game works. And because they brought these two together, they created a massive global problem which allowed them to offer a massive global solution. All those United Nations, like the League of Nations after the First World War, and all the Bretton Woods Agreement, the World Bank, the IMF, and all this stuff was justified, including the European Union. Let's come together in Europe and we'll stop a war. Let's come together and have a central control of Europe, which we've just fought a war to stop. All came together, justified by stopping war in Europe. And now we have another version of it, which I call no problem reaction solution, weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. You don't need even a real problem, you just need the perception of the problem to get the public to support, or at least not to efficiently reject what you want to do to change society.
Why did you lie to get us into a war that was not necessary and that has caused these kinds of casualties? Why?
Well, first of all, I haven't lied. It appears that there were not weapons of mass destruction there.
You said you knew where they were.
I did not. I said I knew where suspect sites were, and
You said you knew where they were, near Tikrit, near Baghdad, and northeast, south, and west of there. Those are your words.
We know where they are. They're in the area around Tikrit and Baghdad and east, west, south, and north.
Is there any hard evidence directly linking the Iraqi government to al-Qaeda and the 9/11 terror attacks against the United States?
Yes, there are contacts between Iraq and al-Qaeda. Iraq provided some training to al-Qaeda in chemical weapons development.
Isn't it a fact, Dr. Rice, that the August 6 PDB warned against possible attacks in this country?
I really don't remember, Commissioner, whether I discussed this with the President.
And I ask you whether you recall the title of that PDB.
I believe the title was Bin Laden Determined to Attack Inside the United States. Bin Laden Determined to Attack Inside the United States. Now, the PDB, no, Mr. Benveniste,
I will get into the...
I would like to finish my point here.
I didn't know there was a
Given that
point.
you asked me whether or not it warned of attacks. And
I asked you what the title was.
You said, did it...
There are a lot of people who lie and get away with it, and that's just a fact.
You have said in the past that it was, quote, pretty well confirmed.
No, I never said that.
Okay. I
never
think
said
that is...
No, it's absolutely not. What I said was the Czech intelligence service reported after 9/11 that Atta had been in Prague on April 9th of 2001, where he allegedly met with an Iraqi intelligence official. We have never been able to confirm that, nor have we been able to knock it down. It's been pretty well confirmed that he did go to Prague and he did meet with a senior official of the Iraqi intelligence service in Czechoslovakia last April.
Some new lies thrown in for good measure. Make it look fresh. Fresh lies on top of the old lies.
We've learned that Iraq has trained al-Qaeda members in bomb making, and poisons, and deadly gases. He's a threat because he is dealing with al-Qaeda. We know that Iraq and al-Qaeda have had high-level contacts that go back a decade. What did Iraq have to do with what?
The attack on the World Trade Center.
Nothing, except for it's part of, and nobody's ever suggested in this administration that Saddam Hussein ordered the attack. Iraq was a he's got chemical weapons. He's got biological weapons. He wants to have a nuclear weapon, and he's got some capacity.
I don't know anybody that I can think of who has contended that the Iraqis had nuclear weapons.
The biggest lie of all, the claim that Iraq has no weapons of mass destruction.
They're lying. Next.
And this, now we are facing a presidential version of problem, reaction, solution. What we've seen in America is presidential problem, reaction, solution. They brought Bush in just as a front man, fronting up these neoconservative, neocon people that were behind the Bush era and the invasion of Iraq and all this stuff, and Afghanistan. And his job, or that group's job, was to create massive problems, not least foreign wars and stretching them militarily, but also to create massive financial problems towards the end of the Bush administration, which is exactly what they did. And then there's a massive problem, there's great fear and anxiety, and then they bring in the used car salesman with the big smile and the dark eyes and very good at reading teleprompters called Barack Obama. People I thought knew better actually believed that this man could come out of nowhere and, as a genuine man with taking the country in a different direction for good for the people, would somehow attract the biggest funding of any presidential candidate in American history. And most of it came from Wall Street. Now, I ask this, do turkeys really vote for Christmas if they are aware that that's what they're doing? No. They funded him because he is just a front man for them. This is the guy behind Barack Obama, or one of the key men behind Barack Obama, Zbigniew Brzezinski. And Brzezinski talks about this area. He's been talking about this area for a long time. He calls it Eurasia. And he says that to control the world, in effect, in simple terms, you need to control Eurasia, this area of land that includes key places like Afghanistan, Iran, the places around the Caspian Sea, this great area of oil and gas reserves, like Georgia, where they've been having problems recently, Pakistan, and all this area, which so much of the world is now focusing on, is this area of the world going up into Russia. We now have a situation in Israel where the extreme of the extreme has taken the reins of power. Benjamin Netanyahu, he's talked about, these are his words summarized, he wants a violent reoccupation of Gaza to liquidate its elected government. And he pledges to thwart the Iranian threat once and for all. He's now got this guy, Lieberman, as his foreign minister, and this man's so far right, he topples over, right? And he's got Barak as the defense minister in this new government, and he was defense minister that oversaw the pepper bombing of the Gaza Strip. And this is Martin van Creveld. He's a well-known historian in Israel, and this is what he said publicly. We possess several hundred atomic warheads and rockets and can launch them at targets in all directions, perhaps even at Rome. Most European capitals are targets for our Air Force. We have the capability to take the world down with us, and I can assure you that that will happen before Israel goes under. And this man, who is an arch-Zionist called Dennis Ross, he's now in charge of Iran policy. What it's building to is an effort, and Brzezinski is behind this, among many others, to create a conflict out of the Middle East, and in this area we're looking at, to bring about a third world war. And the third world war will be, and this was been written about in the past, that there were going to be 3 world wars to bring this new world order into being, a war that would finish off the superpowers and bring the whole world under the control of a world government, which will then dictate to every country.
Speculation is reaching critical mass that Israel is inching closer to launching a military airstrike against Iran's nuclear program.
There is obviously concern about Iran. It's a country that supports terrorists. It's a country that has indicated an interest in having weapons of mass destruction.
What about Iran? Do you take seriously the possibility of the West going to war with them to stop that, or preemptive strikes?
Yes, I think the threat of the use of military force is real. The Israelis are not going to stand for an existential threat to their state. It's time to back the Iranians into a corner diplomatically, and we can do so with tougher sanctions.
Iran and their feverish attempt to build, buy, or steal nuclear weapons is the #1 threat in the Middle East, and Israel's deputy prime minister is now saying it looks as though war with Iran may be unavoidable. I don't think the Israelis have the capacity to neutralize Iran's nuclear threat.
Okay.
They don't have enough in the Air Force or long-range missiles, but the United States does.
We do ask the international community, and especially the White House, to engage in the risk of Iran. It is not a threat only for Israelis. It's not a threat only for Jews. It's a threat for American people. History has taught us that when you have a leader who is threatening to kill the Jewish people, we better listen to him and not ignore him.
This is not hard for Israel at this point. Unless Israel is prepared to live with Iran with nuclear weapons, the answer is yes, they will attack. As in the past, they attacked Syria's nuclear reactor in September of 2007 and Saddam Hussein's nuclear reactor in 1981. Israel is going to need to strike soon, and in fact, should have struck long ago.
The president of Israel is calling on the world to do whatever it takes to stop Iran from developing nuclear weapons. Iran, of course, repeatedly saying that its nuclear program is intended just for peaceful purposes.
Israel has begun testing long-range ballistic missiles. It's a move that has many asking if Israel plans to launch a preemptive strike against Iran.
Israel is preparing for a possible attack on Iran. Drills like this one now happen on a regular basis. Evacuations, checking for radiation, and then defending the home front. The Israeli military tested this long-range ballistic missile, the Jericho-3, a 3-stage solid-fuel missile with roughly a 4,000-mile range, capable of striking Iran.
Iran has a clear choice to make: suspend its nuclear weapons program and accept our offer of negotiations, or face growing isolation and the collective response not just of one nation, but of all nations around the world.
We must be very transparent about the fact that we cannot tolerate nuclear Iran based on ideology that is destined to destroy Israel.
The Iranian regime needs to know that if it stays on its present course, the international community is prepared to impose meaningful consequences.
The UN's nuclear watchdog, the IAEA, has just released its toughest and most comprehensive report on Iran. It says it's seriously concerned that Tehran may be working towards a nuclear bomb. Israel has raised the threat of a military strike against the nuclear sites. But Russia says the report contains no new evidence and could hurt the chances for diplomacy.
The IAEA report has exposed the divisions in the international community about how best to deal with Iran. Concern about the Iranian nuclear program is widespread. But while the US and its allies want to pile on the pressure and bring in more sanctions, countries like Russia and China are more cautious.
Well, I'm all in favor of those with nuclear weapons moving towards the disarmament of them. And I'm against other people acquiring nuclear weapons if they do. But what I can't accept is that some countries can possess nuclear weapons and the 5 permanent seats on the Security Council of the United Nations that go with them until the indeterminate future, in reality forever, almost certainly, whilst threatening other countries who have no nuclear weapons with condign punishment should they ever seek to acquire them. The countries that have nuclear weapons are not just the permanent 5. India and Pakistan acquired nuclear weapons and were not only not punished for doing so, but were rewarded for doing so. Both of them acquired nuclear weapons absolutely illegally and out with the terms of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. There was no crisis then. There was no lineup of world leaders ready to threaten all sorts of repercussions when they did. They were rewarded for doing so. Israel has hundreds of nuclear weapons, has never admitted it, has never signed the Non-Proliferation Treaty, has regularly invaded and occupied its neighbours, and has broken more international laws than all the other countries of the world put together. Is anybody threatening Israel with sanctions? Honestly, the double standards of this makes me angry, but the stupidity of people who fall for it makes me angrier still.